Hey YouTube, it's Natalie, and I'm going to be answering frequently Googled lawyer questions. Let's head on over to Google. I don't know if you guys have ever seen this game. It's on Wired, and they take celebrities and have them do frequently Googled questions about the celebrity. And I thought that I would apply this to being an attorney. And it's just basically, what do lawyers, who do lawyers, that type of thing. Okay, so what do lawyers do? Okay, so the first question that comes up, the most frequently searched question for what do lawyers is, what do lawyers do? So lawyers represent clients in either criminal or civil cases in that client's best interest, or they work for the government prosecuting cases or representing the government. So that client could either be the government or an individual person or a corporation. And basically, an attorney is tasked with protecting that person's interest, that corporation's interest, or that government's interest. What do lawyers major in? So that's not that simple of a question. Obviously, in order to go to law school, what you obtain at the end of law school is called a Juris Doctorate, also known as a JD. So everyone that is a lawyer practicing in the United States of America, for the most part, has a Juris Doctorate. It's equivalent to like a PhD. And you have to do 3 additional years after college in order to complete your Juris Doctorate degree, unless you take an advanced or accelerated law program, which is what I took. I took an accelerated program, and so I finished law school in 2 years versus the normal 3 years. But for undergraduate, which is your college education, which is when you're a freshman, sophomore, junior, senior in college, you can major in anything that you want in order to become an attorney. It's always good to keep an eye on what you eventually want to do once you get into law school, what you want to do once you get out of law school. But there are people that have majored in the arts, the sciences. They have majored in English, journalism, criminal justice, chemistry, all types of different things. There are people that have gotten master's degrees in certain subjects before going on to get their JD. So you can major in anything that you want to. What do lawyers wear is the third question. That's funny. Lawyers wear anything. It depends on what they're doing. So if you're a lawyer working in the military, say JAG, for example, you're going to be wearing your military uniform. If you're an attorney appearing in court, on the days that you appear in court, you're going to, of course, be wearing a suit. It used to be an old-fashioned rule that they thought that women should wear skirt suits and not pantsuits in court. But of course, that can no longer be enforced, and judges and courts and things are advised not to tell women that they have to wear skirts and things like that. But it is perceived. There's still some older people that still carry the idea that you should wear skirt suits, but usually it's just a suit to court. Now, if you're working in corporate law or at a law firm, sometimes the law firm will have dress codes where they will require that the attorney wears a suit to either business casual or a suit to the office, except for on casual Fridays. But for the most part, attorneys wear whatever they want unless they're in court. And then in court, you're going to be wearing your suit. So I wear clothes like this into my office, and then I wear a suit when I'm going to court, and especially if I'm going to trial. What do lawyers make? I'm sure that they mean like, how much money do they make? I think that they mean by what do lawyers make is how much money do lawyers make. Lawyers can make anything from $30,000 to $40,000 all the way up to multi-millions per year. It depends on what type of law that you're practicing. If you're working for a local legal aid, sometimes you can be starting out in the mid-30s range depending on where you are, depending on where you're practicing. If you're at a public defender's office in a really poor area, let's say Louisiana, for example, many of them can start out making $40,000, sometimes less. $45,000 I know is what legal aid was offering when I was graduating from law school. Obviously, I couldn't afford to take that job. There was another job that I looked at that was helping women who were alleged victims of domestic violence, helping them to obtain protective orders. and they were paying $45,000 a year. So they can start that low. And then I've also seen jobs where if the person is more specialized, say that they're working in IP, which is intellectual property, they're working in corporate law, something like that, they could be offering $200,000 salaries. So that all depends on if you're going into a big law firm, are you going into public interest? Now, if you're working for yourself, you're a solo practitioner, which means that they usually call that being in private practice, meaning you're working for yourself and you just hang up your shingle on your office. The sky's the limit. But it also is very difficult to make money, especially the first couple of years doing that type of practice. If you're doing mostly a mixed practice of criminal law, family law, personal injury litigation, that's the more common solo practitioner areas of law. You could see yourself doing something like 50,000 maybe in your first year, maybe even less than that. And then if you establish a really good reputation within the next few years, you could be making 60, 70, 80, 90,000. I don't think that those attorneys make more than maybe 150. You're usually going to need to take on staff at that point. You're going to probably need an associate. You're probably going to, you might take on a partner. So however much your take home pay is, it's not going to be all that much compared to maybe what like a doctor would make or what people expect. Many lawyers are making what would be considered a middle class wage. 50, 60, 70, 80, $90,000. Now, if you're working for the government, baseline, the Attorney General's office, they usually offer to their, so the Federal Attorney General's office, they're usually offering about 95 to 100,000 for entry-level attorneys. So that's, pretty good for the national average. And then obviously you would get step increases from there. Whereas if you're working for like a public defender's office, you could be making anything from like 50,000, 55,000, 60,000 coming in depending on the amount of experience that you have. So it all depends on where you are and it varies very widely. What do lawyers do all day? Well, again, it depends on the type of law that you practice. So I can just use my example of during my criminal practice. What I do all day is usually you have court in the morning. So it depends on if you have court that day, but let's just take it as a day that you have court. If it's a day that you have court where you don't have trial, so for example, say you have like a status conference or you have a motions hearing or a preliminary hearing or a district court docket, you would usually have court in the morning unless you have an afternoon case or an afternoon caseload. You have to come in, check in with your client. If they're not in jail, they're not incarcerated, you want to make sure that you have called them the day before to make sure that they're going to be there. You would have had communication leading up to court, obviously, but you always want to check in with them the day before, see them the day before, call them the day before to make sure that you guys know what's going to happen on the day of court. When you're done in court, that could take, you never know when you have court how long you're going to be there. You could just be there for an hour. You could be there all day. You could be there until the afternoon. There's no way to know. It's up to the court. It depends on if you're in a more busy jurisdiction, how long you're going to be there. But then in your afternoons, that usually consists of visiting your clients that are incarcerated, making phone calls to clients that are not incarcerated. You need to do legal research and prepare for the things that you have coming up for the rest of the week. So usually Sunday is a good day to check and see what it is that you have coming up for the next 7 days. And if you know that the next day you're going to have like a motions hearing or something or a trial, you want to be preparing. So the way that you prepare is you do legal research, you make sure that you know what you're going to be asking your witnesses, things of that nature. You might even do some writing throughout the day. So maybe you need to write a motion in preparation for a motions hearing in the next week, or you need to write up jury instructions or something like that. You need to be writing those as well. Your day can be, there's not many people that work a typical 9 to 5 when they're an attorney. It's a profession. It's not a job. It doesn't really have set hours. So some attorneys are working 80 hours a week, depending on what type of law that they're practicing. When I worked in workers' compensation, my average day would be coming in. The first thing I would do was go to a workers' compensation hearing, get back into my office, returning client phone calls, which were to be returned within 24 hours. After finished speaking to clients, then you would do whatever tasks that arose as a result of speaking to your clients. Following up with anything that happened in court, filing anything that was necessary to be filed, legal research, and writing. So my day could go from 7:30 a.m. all the way till about 7:30 p.m. in that area of practice. And that's not completely uncommon. And many people work that many hours and sometimes even more because they also work on weekends. Now, if you also have to market as an attorney because you are in an area of practice in which you need to drum up business, you need to get clients to come to you, then you may have to go to conferences, you may have to work on your advertising, your billboard, whatever the case may be. You might need to get your name out there, so you also have to work on that throughout the day. What do lawyers look for in jurors? That's a really good question. So what lawyers look for in jurors is, for me, so it depends on who you are. So let's say that we're talking about a criminal case, for example. I think that's the easiest real world example to me. If I am, as lawyers, when you're doing jury selection, you're doing a lot of stereotyping. So you don't know a lot, especially in my state, you don't know a lot about your jury until, you're looking at them right there in front of their face. And sometimes you don't even get to talk to them in the state of Maryland. So many of the jurors, you don't even get to know what their answers are to some of the questions, but you do get to go through this process called voir dire, which means that it means to see and to say. And you get to see your jury and you get to say things to your jury, which is ask them questions. And usually the judge will ask the questions that you propound to the court. So the questions that you'll normally ask are, you're going to look to see, does this person have any biases against my client? So say my client is charged with a sexual assault against a minor. What you're going to want to see with your jury is, are they able to sit through and listen dispassionately to a case where it involves an alleged sexual assault against a minor? People will be very honest with you and tell you, there's no way I'm going to be able to look at your client and give him a fair shake. You're also able to ask, sometimes you're able to ask about racial biases that your jury may potentially have. You're able to see how old your jurors are, your potential jurors, so their age group. You're able to see what neighborhood they live in. You're able to see what jobs they have and what jobs their spouses have if they are in fact married. So when it comes to stereotyping your potential jurors, what you're going to look to see is, maybe someone that lives in a more middle-class neighborhood, that's a homeowner, that works in mall security, for example, is not going to like my burglary case where someone broke into a similarly situated home, and then they're going to feel like, I can't find this person not guilty because I don't want my property or my home to be burglarized. So you want to look and see how similar your juror is to the alleged victim and how similar your juror is to the alleged defendant. And then you want to ferret out any obvious biases that they express verbally if you are actually able to speak to them. And I can go through the voir dire process a lot more later, but if you are actually able to speak to your jury, then you might be able to ferret out some of their biases and then get rid of them, either because they express biases or because you have a limited amount of challenges to be able to get that person out of there. So that's what you're looking for. You're looking to see if they're biased or not. What do lawyers wear to court? I think I already talked about that. What do lawyers actually do? All types of things. Not every lawyer walks into court. A lot of lawyers, many attorneys never step foot in a courtroom. They're transactional attorneys. They write wills. They manage people's estates. They serve as trustees. They write contracts. They handle business transactions. They oversee things that have nothing to do with ever stepping foot in court, and maybe the most they'll ever be is like a witness, but instead they're legal geniuses when it comes to writing up that contract or writing up that will or helping corporations to organize. So that is what attorneys do. They do everything. Attorneys can be involved in every single aspect of your life. They can be involved in your child custody. They can be involved and they can be appointed to a child if the child is in need of assistance or if the child is in need of like a guardian to oversee them while their parents are going through a custody battle or a divorce. Attorneys can be involved when you're making certain healthcare decisions. Attorneys can be involved in, like I said, organizing corporations, putting companies together, dissolving corporations, purchasing of property. Attorneys are involved in the purchasing of properties. So lawyers do almost everything and have something to do with almost every aspect of life because almost everything is regulated by some form of law, either statutory or common law. What do lawyers do in court? So it depends on what type of thing that you're involved in. But what lawyers do in court is they represent either the client or the government, and they are protecting the interests of the client, or if they are working for the government, either working for the state or working for the federal government, they're protecting the interests of the community. So they are operating at all aspects. A defense attorney is in all aspects. They're operating not just in the best interest of their client, but they're operating with what their client basically wants them to do. They're not guardians of their clients. Instead, they are agents of their clients. They're putting forth the best possible defense for their client to be found not guilty, or if they represent the state, they're putting forth the best possible evidence for the state for the person to be found guilty and to protect the community. And sometimes those two things are at odds with one another, which is protecting the community and pursuing a case. What do lawyers study? So like I said, lawyers will study anything in undergrad. Really, it can be anything, but you should also, when it comes to law school admissions, you should really keep your eye on what you want to do once you get out of law school. But once you're in law school, you have your 1L year, which is your most difficult year. It's going to be your foundational year. You're going to have classes on contracts, property. Property is probably the bane of many 1L law students' existence. You're going to have an introduction to criminal law, an introduction to constitutional law, an introduction probably to family law. Not always, but sometimes you'll have a family law that very first year. Constitutional law is so important to the first year. So as you see, you didn't hear me say corporations. You didn't hear me say, mergers and acquisitions, trusts, anything like that. Your first year is foundations of law. So the foundations of law is going to be that constitutional law. It's going to be that property law. A lot of the times it's family law, and it's going to be criminal law. So those are the things that you're going to be learning, the foundations of law, basically. And you're going to learn how to think like a lawyer in your first year of law school. They're going to teach you how to look at things analytically and to read cases, brief cases, break cases down, learn how to figure out what the holding is in a case versus what the dicta is in a case. That's all the types of things that you study in law school. And that first year of law school is a doozy. The 1L year, it's very, very stressful for a lot of people. So it's really a change to the mind to have to adjust from thinking like an everyday person to thinking logically and thinking like a lawyer. Okay, so where do lawyers work? Okay, so where do lawyers work? Lawyers work everywhere, like I said before, in every aspect of life. Where do lawyers make the most money? Lawyers are going to make the most money in public interest areas of law. So where you're not working directly with an individual, because individual people only have but so much money, but usually where you're working for a group. If you're working for a company, if you're working for a larger government, you might be able to make more money there. But if you're of counsel to Amazon, for example, if Amazon hires you to be their lawyer, then you're going to be making the most money there. So it's easier to say you're not going to make the most money in the area that I practice in, which is criminal defense, where you're representing indigent people. You're not going to make the most money there. So if that's your number one priority, do something else, right? You're not going to make the most money helping people not get evicted from their homes, so like Legal Aid Society. You're not going to help people that are trying to find housing. You're not going to make the most money helping people that are trying to find housing. The way that you're going to make the most money is doing other areas of law that usually entails representing large companies or corporations. That does not mean that people that go into non-public interest areas of law do not help individual people. Many of them do. Many of them do what's called pro bono work, and that means that they represent people for free. And you are usually encouraged by your bar association, by the bar of the state, you're usually encouraged by them to complete a certain amount of public interest or pro bono hours, for free hours, where you're representing people that normally couldn't afford to hire an attorney on their own. Where do lawyers hang out? Oh my gosh. Okay, so a lot of law students, you're gonna find them at the local, bar. But lawyers are diverse in where they hang out and the backgrounds that they come from. I know that a lot of my coworkers and I, we have like a common like lunch thing that we like to do. We're pretty chill people, so we're hippy dippy public defenders. So we have lunch together. We'll go over to each other's houses and maybe drink wine or have tea and things like that. So that's where we really hang out. I know that when I was a younger attorney in my 20s, it was like more bars and things like that. But anywhere else that anybody would hang out, a lawyer would hang out, because lawyers are, people too. Where do lawyers live? Everywhere, in every neighborhood. I think Cory Booker's an attorney, and Cory Booker was living in the projects. He still does, to help the people in his general community. I lived in an apartment until I lived in a house. Lawyers live everywhere. Where do lawyers look for jobs? One of the better, there's a bunch of different things. You can look for jobs through networking, obviously, talking to people. Indeed is a good place to look for jobs if you're an attorney. Avo is where people search for you if you're a solo practitioner, or, if you're a solo practitioner where people look for you, Avo is maybe one place you'd like to go to. Where do lawyers advertise? Oh my goodness, all over the place. There's different types of advertisement if you're a lawyer. And I only have experience with this because I briefly did workers' compensation. By briefly, I mean 2 years, but briefly compared to the rest of my legal career. So some people in workers' compensation put up billboards, they did commercials, but that costs a lot of money. Another way to do advertisement is word of mouth. So having great client interaction and giving your clients a great service, and then telling them, hey, if you could just review me on Google or review me on Avo or something like that, I'd really appreciate it. So if you have your clients review you online, if they really enjoyed their interaction with you and you did a good job, that is free advertising right there. Another way to get good advertising as an attorney is to attend. So whatever your clientele is, do you represent people at publishing companies, right? Do you work in do you work in publishing? Are you an attorney in publishing? Well, wherever that publishing company has like a trade conference, then you want to make sure that you're at that trade conference. So I used to work for a publishing agency who had their own law firm. And one of the things that publishing agency would do would put on different conferences for the different news articles for the different magazines that they would publish. And their magazines were about transportation. They were about trains, tugboats, like really not very interesting stuff. But the lawyers were able to pick up clients by attending those trade conferences. So that's one way to advertise, is attending teachers union conferences. If there's like a criminal justice reform panel that's being held in your area and you want to do criminal practice, it would behoove you to contact the people that are running that criminal justice reform panel that's coming up and say, hey, can I be a speaker? Or how much is it to attend? And then just pay the $20 to attend, or attend for free. A lot of them are for free for the public, and then hand out business cards. So that's one of the best places to advertise, is word of mouth. Where do lawyers live in New York City? Boo, nowhere. I'm from New York. I don't live in New York anymore. I had to leave. Nobody lives in New York anymore. It's too expensive. Where do lawyers get their information? So yeah, there's legal books. That's the old-fashioned way. So all of the laws of your state are published in the code, the criminal code, the family code. They're like a series of books, a volume of books. Kind of think of like encyclopedias where all the laws are placed. So you used to have to go to a law library or purchase the books for the area of law that you practice in, that would provide you with all of the statutes and then the annotations underneath the statutes. So the statutes are the laws that are passed by the legislative bodies, which is like your state senators, your federal Congress, whoever's passing your federal and state laws. Those are the statutes, right? And then underneath the statutes and what's called the annotations, there will be the references of case laws that cite to that statute. So the way that the system of government works in the United States is that you have both statutory law, and then you have legal precedent that comes from case law. And so judges will decide our laws based on either by the Supreme Court or the highest appellate court in your state, based on the statutes. They will interpret the statutes, right? And they will say, we think this is what the legislature means, and so now an officer can search your car based on the odor of marijuana in this particular state, like for example. And now in the modern age, there are different online resources to obtain that same information. Some of those online resources, and the most easily used ones, are called Westlaw and LexisNexis. Those are the ones that lawyers use the most in order to access both statutory and case law. But there are things that come for free, like Fastcase, and also Justia.com provides free online access to statutes and case law. However, most of the times they're not annotated. So the way that you would do it is, if you're not an attorney and you want to find out about the law on something, you would look up like Maryland code on, marijuana possession. It will usually bring up the statute, and then whatever it says, then look up case law on this issue, and then you'll probably be able to find the most recent cases that relate to that issue, or the most relevant cases that relate to that issue. Where do lawyers shop for clothes? Well, for me, because I'm a budgetista, I like to be on a budget. I don't believe in spending a lot of money on clothing. That is something that has changed for me over time. I get my suits from Target, Ross, and Marshalls. But anywhere that you would get clothes, girl, anywhere. Where do lawyers hang out in New York City? It's so funny that so many of these are like New York City related. It's just a good thing that I used to live in New York, I guess. Everywhere that non-lawyers hang out, lawyers will be hanging out, because there's all types of lawyers out there. Obviously, the guys that work and girls that work on Wall Street are going to be at the bars during happy hour over on Wall Street. But for the most part, they're hanging out everywhere else anyone else is. And especially if they're a new attorney, they're not really hanging out that much, because guess what? They're having to learn those statutes, those case law. They're having to do their research, prepare their cases. They have crazy hours. A lot of them are just not hanging out. When do lawyers? Okay. When do lawyers retire? Good question. That really varies. And that's not just on, that doesn't just vary on practice area. That varies based on the individual. Some people are legal eagles that they will basically die in the courtroom. There are some people out there, I don't know if it's like something that's particular to the law itself, but there's some people walking around the courtroom that I see taking full caseloads, serious caseloads, and they're in their 70s. So there's no like mandatory retirement age. And I think a lot of the people that don't retire early or in their 50s or 60s are people that really love the practice of law. Either that, or they haven't made sound financial decisions, or just can't afford to retire. But it's not something that you really have to retire from. I mean, even if you are working for example, if you're a judge, judges are usually mandated to retire at a certain age. Like, they're not allowed to go any further, but they can still get out there and then start practicing the law again. It does happen. And there's just, those people have a lot of experience. They're really good at cutting through the BS. And I don't know. I feel like there's something really, what's the word that I'm looking for? There's something really poignant about an older attorney to me. Like there are some people you'll see and you're like, oh, he needs to retire. Like, he's not with it anymore. But that's not usually how it is. Usually, like, the much older attorneys, there's so much to learn from them, and they've seen it all. And the juries really like them, like when they're taking their cases to trial. So, if you're working in a law firm and that law firm wants to bring in new blood, they might push you out, or they might give you such a good package that you want to leave at a certain point. But for the most part, lawyers, there's no real retirement age for the practice of law. I mean, you have guys in like small towns that are in their 80s that are still practicing law. So there's no retirement age on being an attorney. You would, of course, hope that no one goes so far when they're no longer mentally able or physically able to be an attorney, that they would at some point stop. But that's what we have an attorney grievance commission for. But it does seem that people that are lawyers like really love being a lawyer, and so it's hard for them to stop. When do lawyers use math? Oh my gosh, all the time. in the calculation of guidelines. I hate math. They use them in the calculation of guidelines, which is like sentencing guidelines. They use them in calculating what suspended time your client might receive, how much time they would possibly be in jail. They also use math with workers' compensation to figure out how much money your client could potentially get for the type of injury that they have. They use math for all types of things. Of course, it's not like mathematician level math, but they do use math. And then there's people that like use like statistics and things like that in their practice of law. IP attorneys, I think, use a bit of math. So they use it a bunch of places. When do lawyers specialize? I don't know what that question means. I'm gonna move on. When do lawyers get married? I don't know. We're in 2020 now. Like, when does anyone get married? When do lawyers get married? It depends. So I think that apparently big law firm attorneys are more likely to get a divorce than other attorneys. And the divorce rate amongst attorneys is lower than the divorce rate among doctors. But I don't know when lawyers get married. When do lawyers get paid? Well, if you work for clients and you are a solo practitioner, you get paid whenever you get a new client. And for the most part, you can't use that money. You have to put it in a client trust account until the case is over with. So you can only use the money for defending your client. So if you need to hire an expert or something like that, you would take it out the client fund. If you need to get an investigator, you would take it out of the client's funds. But other than that, you don't touch the money until you've done all the work, and then you're able to pay yourself out of the money. Some people will pay themselves periodically along the amount of time that, so I filed some papers, so I'm going to pay myself from that. I did this, I'm going to pay myself from that. I filed this motion, I'm going to pay myself for that. But me, when I was in solo practice, I only paid myself when I was done doing the work for the client, or if I was hiring someone to represent the client. When do lawyers start charging? Lawyers start charging right away. Usually there's a consultation fee. Some attorneys do give a free consultation, but that should never be expected. And lawyers usually start charging per hour. So every single time that you pick up the phone to call your attorney is charging you. They're charging you an hourly rate. And they have what's called billable hours. They keep track of that. And then you'll get a bill for that phone call. And if you don't pay your bill, then your lawyer's going to withdraw from your case. When do lawyers take the bar exam? They take it after they're finished with law school. They usually encourage you to take it within like the first month or two. Like you study for it during the summer. People start studying during the summer and taking the bar exam in like, I think it's like June or something like that. I think it's June. It's 2 times a year that most states have it. So I took the New York one in June. I took the Maryland one in February. So most people, the people that are taking the February bar are usually people that are non-traditional students, meaning that they've been out of law school for a while, or they're retaking it. I took the February one because I was coming from New York to Maryland, so I had to take the February bar. So that's when they take the bar exam. I personally think that prep courses in law schools should stop pushing their students to take it right after they get out. So like you're studying for like, I don't know, 4 weeks or something like that, 8 weeks, something really short. You're studying for this exam that's going to impact whether or not you get to practice in the area that you just spent 3 years studying for. And then you have to hurry up and take it. It's a lot of pressure. And so I did a lot better when I took off like a year to study for. So I graduated in 2010, but I didn't get barred in Maryland until 2011. So I took an entire year to study for the Maryland bar exam. And then by the time I took it, I felt very prepared because I'm not good personally with standardized testing. So I think that pressure that they put on people to take it within the summer that they get, that the summer after they graduate from law school, is like an artificial pressure that's completely unnecessary and in no way gauges whether or not somebody's going to be a good attorney. When do lawyers start making money? You're going to start really making money like within your 3rd year of practice, depending on what you're doing. You're going to be picking up steam around the 3rd or 4th year. You have to stick it out. For many attorneys, it's not just like you're getting that $90,000 to $100,000 job right out of law school. For some people, that is the case, especially people coming from really good schools or that, have a good connection or have great grades. But that's not the case for everyone. Or if you have a passion like myself, I had a passion for public interest. Like I really just wanted to be able to pay my bills and be a public defender. That's all I wanted to be. Like I love being a PD so much. So that's all I want to do. And so you're not going to really see yourself making any money for the first maybe 3 years. So that is the Ask a Lawyer Google search challenge. Like I said, I saw that on Wired. I hope that you guys enjoyed it. I hope that it was informative. I'm sorry if you caught me scratching my nose a lot, but unfortunately I get allergies and it just makes me really itchy. So I hope that it was a good video. Let me know what else you guys want to see. Comment, like, and subscribe. Be sure to hit that notification bell and check around to see the other videos that I have. And I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.